Hi there, my name is Ben Loomer, and you're listening to another edition of The Bloomer Report. For this week's episode, we are going to listen to the audio recording of what we called the Spoken Word Roundtable. It was a chance to speak to educators and spoken word artists about their craft and how they bring it into the classroom, what works and what are the benefits for bringing in this great writing and production and performing genre that really connects with many students, and for others pushes them out of their comfort zone. So if you've not heard of spoken word poetry, I urge you to check it out, and you can find some good resources in the show notes. One of the reasons why I've been so inspired by spoken word poetry is that it's a creative writing process that when it clicks, there is a huge amount of enthusiasm. And it's really an opportunity for young people to figure out, what's happening inside their heart and connect it to their head. And in a time when we're wanting to think about mental health and wellness, it's a really wonderful opportunity to start conversations and again, really hear from students and where they're at, what their challenges are, what their inspirations are, and provide different opportunities for them to learn to be who they are going to become. With that, we are going to start with some introductions and then dive right into the conversation. Enjoy!
How do I make this short? Okay. Well, hi, I'm Anne Beamish. I'm the English Language Arts Consultant at the English Montreal School Board. That's a lot of English. Secondary. I deal with secondary schools. And spoken word poetry has been something that's made my job worthwhile. I always say to everybody who wants to listen, I've said it all over the place at different conferences, different places. It's practically the best thing that we do at the MSB.
I'm Jennifer Goodall. I'm an English language arts teacher at Centennial Regional High School, which is part of the Riverside School Board. I've been teaching here for 25 years, which shocks me, but it's a fact. And I teach mostly middle school students as well as a senior English class. So we've been holding poetry slams at Centennial for 11 years. I was first introduced to it at a workshop given by Penny Kittle, and I fell in love immediately. And from there, we started small at our school, a few teachers doing it in their classes. We started a little poetry slam competition, became an annual thing. And over the years, it's grown. Our students have competed nationally before, but mostly it has remained homegrown.
Hello, my name is Erin Ross. I've had a wide variety of secondary subjects, but always and currently I'm an English teacher, currently teaching at Queen Elizabeth for Eastern Shores in Satell, secondary cycle 2 this year, 3, 4, 5. And I participated with my students the last 2 years, and I did it because we don't seem to do a lot of academic opportunities for students. It's like sports tournaments and stuff, but I, in the middle of COVID, was looking for, because we used to do public speaking competitions. And I'm trying to encourage other ESSB teachers to get involved with it, so.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liana Kuzmano. My stage name is By Curious George, but there wasn't enough room to put that in the name tag on Zoom. And I'm here in a couple different capacities as a spoken word poet with Dina and Jason. I've been part of the I Belong program for the last couple of years, and I've seen firsthand the things that students can come up with, which is really incredible. I'm also Director of Communications at Poetry and Voice, which is in a partnership with Learn, and specifically Artists Inspire, to send poets into different schools. And, I'm preaching to the choir when I say that spoken word is incredible. And the opportunities that it opens up for students to express themselves is really incredible. So I'm here to hear what people have to say and to bring a poet's perspective to this gathering. And I'm glad to be here.
I'm Jason. I'm a spoken word artist, teaching artist. I love this work. I think it's really important. and there's so much potential, and there's still so much more. I'm really happy that we're doing this today, because for me, I think my dream is to see a really, really strong spoken word infrastructure in Montreal, from elementary all the way to university. And beyond, I would love to see that. And that's always been my big goal, is to how to connect all the dots, because there's so many people in this room and outside of the room, Michael at Throw, and Dina at Throw, and Leanne at Throw, who are doing amazing work. And I just want to see more, and for everybody to know everybody and work the best that we can together.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dina, and I am a poet and performer and teaching artist. I've worked with a lot of folks in the room. I'm married to one of them. And so Jason and I have these conversations all the time about how important this has been for both of us in life, how affirming it has been. And so since the pipeline has been mentioned and the revitalization of the national scene has been mentioned, I will add my 2 cents in that this is also about community building, and for me also about social justice, putting people of diverse backgrounds in the same room, letting people hear each other's stories, tell their truth, recognize themselves in other people through story. And so this has been an amazing journey. From the youngest group I've ever seen was in kindergarten through CJEP. I think it's an amazing opportunity for people to be able to feel seen and heard, and to learn in a place that is as gentle and familiar as a classroom, and as terrifying as a stage. So I think it's been an amazing thing, and I want to promote and support this work as much as I can.
The first topic that I wanted to speak about was kind of experiences or tips around introducing spoken word poetry as a genre, and also this sense of kind of the pre-writing. Kind of what do you do with students to kind of get them into the groove of what they're about to do, and thinking about words and thinking about performance and things like that. So I'd love to hear from the people around the room some things that they've experienced and what's worked. Maybe I'll start with Jennifer.
I made some notes according to your topics. It's interesting. I don't always consciously think of how we do it. So it was a good exercise for me to do this. So I think the number one thing that we do here at Centennial is that we make spoken word poetry a part of our school culture. And so kids come in and almost immediately they hear the buzz, because there's such a large group of students that are involved in it from grade 8 to grade 11. And they get excited to watch the competition that we hold every April. So the way that we make it part of our culture mainly is that we have all of the students in the school come and watch the competition. And sometimes that's challenging to do in a school when you have so many other things going on. And a lot of other subject teachers will try to make the point that it's interrupting what they're doing. But our principal's been really committed, thank goodness. And so is our department. And so every year, the entire student body watches the competition. Some of the grades see several grades, but they at the very least see their own grade. So that's the main thing. In terms of getting students in classes ready to write poems. So like I said, we do it starting in grade 8. We don't do it in grade 7 because we want them to come and watch first and be immersed in it. We have them in our classes, in our grade 8 English classes, then we do it every year, watch all kinds of professional mentor performances, and we include a variety of topics. We have a running list, and both teachers and students add to it every year. So I let the students bring in new suggestions to me, because I know so many of the ones that I like, but they're more on top of it than I am with the newer poems. I obviously have to watch them first, and depending on my group, can choose to show it or not. We talk a lot as a department about what we can show, and depending on the class, the nature of the kinds of poems we can show changes. So especially in recent years, we have gotten into the habit of giving trigger warnings and just being sensitive to the kinds of things that the students want to see. That being said, so many of them want to see things that represent their pain and their experience. So as you know, some of the topics are touchy, but for the most part, the students react really positively to all of that. what else did I want to say? Okay, so we have that running list, and I could share some of the names of the poets, but I'm sure you all know them, all the famous ones, and then the kids, like I said, introduce. But beyond that, we have them, and this is my favorite part, we have them watch many amateur performances in our school, and we sort of have a traveling troupe. And so it kind of comes together casually, but becomes very official quickly. Students hear about Miss Goodall has so-and-so coming from the other class to perform, and they just come see me and they want to be added to the list. And really soon I just get 10 kids interested in doing it. And so it grows and it grows and it grows. And then teachers ask if they could have performances, and then we sort of all share. And so that's my favorite part, is that we just have this traveling troupe, and then students in the school become mentors to the other students. And so then that creates this whole culture. So that would be the main free writing sort of how to get the vibe at Centennial happening.
Great.
Well, I think similar to Jennifer, what she was talking about here, I'll lower my hand, with the idea of having mentor performances. So doing things like Penny Kittle does the brackets activity. So like a March Madness with spoken word poetry, and to build excitement and to identify what the techniques are that the poets use, and then they come to it like the ultimate spoken word piece, or even they put page pieces in performance, a stage and page, stage versus page. They compare them that way. So just to help the students identify what the conventions are of the genre itself, what are some of the techniques that the poets use, whether they're looking at performance or wordcraft.
Dina.
Well, by the time I get into the classroom, it's too late. I'm there already. So getting them ready. As far as what I can do is I let them know that this is not going to be as scary as they think it is. And I use my own personal experience of the first time I went to a slam, shaking the paper in my hand and being terrified, and then realizing that, wait a minute, people are applauding for me. I like this a lot. And I also give them the ancient Greek definition of a poem, which is anything you create is a poem. So you don't have to worry about what it looks like. And it doesn't have to rhyme.
I would say for me, what's important is just to get in there and not have them be worried about what it's going to be or not going to be. They always want to ask, do I have to write a poem? Does it have to rhyme? I'm like, it doesn't. You just go in and you do something and you write something, and I'm going to perform, and I'm going to deconstruct what I did and where it came from. And I want you to just engage with these prompts without the pressure of, we have to finish something right now. I mean, I'm all over the city, and some contracts are longer than others. And I try to gauge in terms of what I'm doing, how far I can go with them. But I just want them to not be afraid to put something down on paper. And where it goes after that is up to them. But for me, it's just, okay, let's just talk about this, whether it's love or fear or identity, whatever it is. We're going to talk about the topics. We're going to watch these videos. I'm going to perform. How do you feel about the topic? Where can you go with this prompt? How does it engage you? Just to see, for me, with the students, you can always look and see who the writers are in the room. And there's some kids that just have the knack and they gravitate towards it. And there are others who they're a little bit more nervous about it. But I want all of them to find a topic that's going to provoke them to figure out how to work through these, the writing of it, and figure out what do they have to say, what's on their heart, and just manifest that through writing and then through words. That's kind of what I'm always looking for, is like, where's the gold, as I would say, where's the gold in your heart and in your mind? What do you have that's pressing? And if I can find those things, then sometimes the poetry writes itself.
Amazing. And that's a good segue kind of into the next topic, because I want to pick up on what you said around prompts. So the next topic is kind of around like the writing process. Like, what are the different activities? What are the strategies that the people in this room use to kind of get the writing going? Because, I realize writing is a process. And so you don't just start, you got to start somewhere. So I would love to hear a little bit about what works to get people writing? And maybe Jason, if I could go back to you, like what's an example of a prompt, for example, that you use?
I am. Rowan Higgins, who's not here, did a video for CBC very recently, and she starts really with I am, and it's a great one because, or something as simple as sometimes that can go in a million different directions. So things that are really simple that they can engage with, those are where I start. Using call and response, fragments of my own work or other people's work, taking, trying to, for me, I hope I'm answering the question, Ben. I'm not going on a tangent, but I try to see if I can balance between performing work, giving them written work, and showing them videos of the poems that I like, because there's so much out there. And it takes a lot to curate and find the videos that I like. But I understand that kids learn differently. And some kids, I can give them text and they're going to gravitate towards it and be able to work with it and extrapolate from it. And others are not. Some are going to see me perform, and that's going to be what's going to make them want to do it. And others are going to see a video and like, that speaks to me because of the topic or the delivery. Because, my style is one thing and Dina's style is another and Michael's is another and Leanna's is another. That there's variety in this art form.
Great.
One of my mentors, Reggie Kubiko in Washington, D.C., who, if you haven't seen him, you don't know who he is, please look him up. One of the first workshops I ever did when I got into this was a workshop with him. And he just we were adults, but he had us write 25 things that piss you off. That was his thing. He's like, what? And so I've asked students that, like, what makes you mad? Let's write 10 things that make us mad. And if something makes you mad, chances are you're going to want to do something about it. So what are you going to do about the thing that makes you mad? So that throws people into their ranting kind of movement and energy, which is always good. I also will perform or show a video and then just ask, what were they talking about? Let's find 5 things that they were talking about and pull the topics out of the poem. And for some people, it's the theme itself. For some people, it's just a word that was used. With some people, it's the energy or the way the performer looked or something about the video itself. It was dark, it was loud, or whatever that is. And then we can work with that. So there are multiple ways to go about it. But one of the things that Jason said that I think is really important is sometimes teachers worry about, like, can we have spoken word in here? I don't know if this class is really, if this is going to work. I think as we develop in our pedagogy, we also become very adept at using different modes. So using oral stuff, using written stuff, using tactile things, having students write, having students have a scribe and write for them, having students type. And so there are so many different ways to do this to get engagement at whatever level the student is. And so literacy isn't even a problem because it's spoken word. So we have multiple ways to get at that. And whether it even becomes, a voice output device or something, like we can get it done as long as the student is able to participate in the classroom in some way. We can get something in and something out.
Leanna.
I completely agree with Dina and with Jason. There's so many different poets out there, so many different styles, so many different students who learn in different ways and who gravitate towards different things. And we, as poets, we learn, I think, to read the room very, very quickly and make decisions on the fly. But one thing that I keep coming back to, and I think it's something that helps to reassure the students, is that there's no way to do this wrong. And so the first exercise that we're going to do is you're just going to word dump on the page. And I don't care if you start with, I don't know what to write, this is silly, write about what you ate for breakfast. And then it usually goes from there. Don't worry about spelling, don't worry about punctuation, don't worry about any of that, because there's a lot of, for some people, for some students, the resistance is, I don't want to do this because I don't understand it. And for other people, for other students, it's, I'm really scared to do this wrong. And their page is blank. And then that's a really easy exercise to build on, because you can say things like, okay, go through all the words that you wrote down. It doesn't matter if they don't make sense, and just circle all of the nouns and all of the verbs. And you start to build this sort of toolbox that students can come back to. The actions and the things and people and places that you write about will become the focal points of your poem. That's what people are going to be paying attention to. And I talk about poetry as being a puzzle that you put together yourself. You're going to decide what it's going to look like, and you decide what all of the pieces are. It'll look like, it's going to be different from everybody else's. It's going to be yours. There's no way to fail at this. And sometimes it's a process. It's something that you have to repeat often. And some students really latch onto that, like, oh, that's right, I can write whatever, as long as there are words. Something will come out of this. What it is that I have to say will come out of this. And so I find that circle all the nouns and verbs is a really easy exercise to get students to realize, oh, these words are mine, I wrote them, and a story is coming out of them slowly, a bit at a time.
Great. Thank you. That's great. Jennifer, I'm going to bounce this to you because we had a email conversation about this. What are your thoughts around kind of the writing process, like things you do to get your students writing?
Well, I very much agree with Dina and Jason about the quick write opportunities. So that's what I had written as the number one way I get them to write, with a variety of quick writes. So put the timer on and give them a prompt. I also really like that tip, Leanna, about the nouns and the verbs. So thank you for that. I wrote that down. We often will analyze the poets and have a look at what they're doing, learn from the experts, and take some of their strategies and then try to apply them. But before we even get there, I often have two kinds of students that absolutely want to put everything down on a paper and share it with everybody. And they're super confessional. And then I have the ones that are really private and don't want to say anything that makes them vulnerable. So right away, we established that there are many ways that you can do this, and you can write about something that is confessional if you're comfortable with it. And then obviously at a later part in this conversation, we'll talk about that. But if you don't want to do that at all, that you can write about an issue that is important to you, but not personal to you. It doesn't have to be, so that they could reach out to social justice issues that may or may not affect them, but sort of take a more objective third person stance if they're more comfortable with that. And so I feel like that creates a path for a lot of the students there that are very intimidated about being too personal. So we establish you do not have to pour your heart out, although you are welcome to do so. I'll just say quick something about a lot of them, the younger ones especially, they'll connect with rap and they'll immediately want to rhyme, which is welcome. But we try to emphasize that they should rhyme if it comes naturally to them, but if it doesn't, it may not sound the way they want it to, and try to teach them a little bit more about repetition and wordplay. And again, looking at the experts to see how they do that and unpacking it. Taking all those lessons we've learned in English class for years about metaphors and extending the metaphors, and that helps them to feel like they have a tool. A big one that we encourage them to do is to write about a pebble, which I didn't invent that. I took that from Nancy Atwell a million years ago. Instead of tackling, giant themes, to write about something more specific and personal, and that will make you connect with your readers in a much more meaningful way. And so they get good at that. And then we have them work with each other, and so much conferencing with the teachers as well. And then in the past, we've also had poets come in. We haven't done that in a few years, but just hearing all of you speak, sorry, I'm in school. Hearing all of you speak is making me want to have poets come back. So that's exciting.
The next thing I wanted to kind of talk about, and this honestly comes from my experience over the last few years, where seeing the performances of students at Queen Elizabeth, at Centennial, at Perspectives, the polished performance. I would love to hear from a few of you about how you get students to edit, to revise, the different techniques and strategies around that, leading to the stage presence and performance and delivery. How do you do that? How do you get these young people to perform in such a strong and powerful way?
What I've come up with, I don't know where it came from besides my childhood, is Legos. So I explain Legos as an editing metaphor, that to build a poem is to deconstruct it and put it back together. And you have big pieces, you have small pieces, you have medium-sized pieces, and to look at the stanza as a big piece, the sentence as a medium piece, and the And the word is a small piece. And how can you deconstruct what you've written and put it all back together? I think that kind of helps. And then when we get into performance, talk about things like grounding, projection, relaxation, eye contact, pace, and just relaxing. Because I think looking back at, when I started, my pace was like really, really, really out of control. And I didn't know it. And if I didn't have the recordings from when I was like 18, I would have no clue in terms of how things have changed. But also, I'm saying that because for them to also understand there's an evolution. And when you see someone who's on YouTube or whatever, they've been doing this for a long time. Where you're going to start is not where they are now. And to be patient with yourselves to say, okay, I'm learning, and there's a lot to take in. There's a lot to understand. Let's build one step at a time.
Thank you. Erin.
Well, we practice a lot at Queenie. I get them to practice a lot with partners in front of the class. I'm very lucky to have a lot of support staff that'll give their time to even listening to it at lunch. Sometimes that takes a lot of the pressure off. Instead of in class, just come up on the stage while I'm lunch supervising and, give it to me, But also I just want to add, just in case I forget, that I think it was a lot easier for my students last year because you had those videos that you had compiled. And I think that helped with visualization because they were of the students from the year before. So they had a better understanding what to expect. So I think that's good because they're very visual learners. So.
I show them some of my favorites, and we talk about what they did. And I ask, do you believe them? Do you think this is a real story, an imaginary story? What is it that makes you feel like this was real? Or how do you think they felt when they were talking about it? And I show different kinds of poems, things that are, louder or softer or more emotional, and group pieces and things like that. And we do theater games sometimes. We talk about, what it is that makes people feel things in a performance. I will also go to the back of the room and say, okay, I can't hear you. Okay, or just look at me or look at my earring. If you don't want to look at me, look at my earring. And so we figure out those kinds of things. If eye contact makes you nervous, look past the person. And so we do those kinds of things. And I mean, they've helped all of us in different ways for different settings. Also talk about memorizing and figuring out what style works for you, whether you are a repeat all the time kind of person, whether you need to record it and listen to it all the time, whether you need to say it while you're walking or do something. So we talk about those kinds of things. And I let them know the more you can embody the poem, the farther off book you can be, the freer you are. And so the habit of practice is really important no matter what you do, whether you're playing sports or an instrument. It's the same kind of thing.
So I'm going to mention the school culture again. I think that's the number one way that we get them to have polished performances. So some of the slam poets in our school become sort of mini celebrities. So the younger students know them and then look forward to having them in their class. And then those performers love performing. So I can work with them beforehand and sort of feed them what I want them to teach the students. So they'll perform a poem that the students probably would have seen the previous year. And then the students get to ask them questions about it. And this is before they're writing theirs for the first time. So they're asking them, how do you say it like that? What do you do? And sort of deconstructing it. And then the performer writers will share all of their insight with them. So it's really quite organic and wonderful. I mean, I do prompt them, but it's pretty cool to watch. We do this exercise where a really gifted performer will take a mediocre piece and perform it with all of those public speaking skills that they have. And then we will give somebody who's been told to perform in a very monotonous manner a fabulous piece. And the students will just obviously see the differences. And so then they'll recognize the importance of performance in spoken word. So that's a really fun and helpful way to do it. And then also having real audience opportunities as much as possible. So anytime I hear about a competition or anytime even the kids can go to other classes, we make that happen as much as possible because that's when they really want to polish. They want to polish when they get to perform for a real audience. So that lends itself so easily to it. And then the students also work together, giving each other constructive criticism. And even the best students do that. Like when we were preparing for the competition that you ran last year, Ben, they all got together and would perform with each other and give each other tips. And so that they became a slam poem team, and there was a real camaraderie.
Thank you. While I got you on the mic, one thing that I've seen your students do before is the group poems. Can you maybe say a few words around group poetry and then like how that kind of performance process as well?
Sure. So that sprung out of some students being nervous to perform by themselves. So that option just happened naturally, that they felt more comfortable doing it with somebody else or several. And then there's a lot of group poems became quite popular a few years ago. So there were a lot of performances that we watched. And so it's sort of contagious, right? In a good way. And so they'll see groups in the auditorium and then students just want to do it. So the way we do it in our classes, because in grade 8 and 9 at Centennial, it's mandatory that you write a spoken word poem and that you perform it in your class. It is not mandatory that you perform it in front of the entire school. But then all the classes have different ways of choosing the participants, usually class vote, teacher recommendation. Then they get ready to go to the auditorium to do that. But there's an entire separate category for groups because it became so popular. But only in grade 9 do you get the option to do a group instead of a solo performance, which kind of makes them excited. In grade 8, you have to do a solo performance, but you're able to do a group performance as a bonus. And it's quite surprising how many of them want to do the extras. And so they also get the chance to perform in groups or in duets, like across classes. So then that sometimes motivates them that they want to work with a friend that they're not in the same class as, or even with a friend in another grade. So it became contagious and they're so excited. So sometimes they're planning next year's poem this year.
Do you have any techniques or tips on when a student looks at another person's piece and gives constructive feedback or offers a suggestion? Like what works around doing that? Yes, Dina.
You can use the format of, we're going to say 3 positive things, and then we're going to say one thing where there's room for growth. We won't even call it like a negative thing. There's that. And there's also just telling your own personal story. I tell a story to groups about being on a slam team and having my individual poem turned into a group poem and just hating it, just hating the whole process of it and watching my poor baby poem be, beat up. And I was furious. It was good at the end, but I wasn't happy during the process. So talking about like, this is something where there's give and take and some of these things are going to create some feelings and it's okay. And if something's too much, it's just too much. And say that before the fact. And even if you can't say that before the fact, understanding that if it becomes too much for someone and they need to leave the space, then they need to leave the space. And that we're not mad about that. It was just too much. And then how do you repair that? And this is why, for me, talking about social justice and interactions and power dynamics and things like that is also important, because people come to the situation with those things already. And this can become a really emotional process, but it's okay. Like, we're all going to be okay. It's all going to be all right. And this this can actually make everything better if we let it, but we have to listen to each other and be open to somebody saying, you know what, I can't. And that's all right too.
Great. Thank you. So, this has been an amazing conversation and we're kind of at the tail end of it. So there's kind of one last bit I want to kind of talk about. So my last kind of topic or question I wanted to ask was around, avoiding pitfalls or any insights that have been gained over the years. Certainly, like, I'm a big fan of learning from other people and not making the same mistakes twice. So I'd love to hear any stories or any examples of things that you're like, let's not do that again, or whatever. Any kind of insights. over the years of experience in this room? Leanna.
This is not something that you can always control. And it really helps if you've built a base or a foundation of trust with the students at the beginning, which is easier to do if you're a poet who's going to come back over a few weeks. But I've noticed that when it comes time to perform, it happens a lot. Nobody wants to perform. Nobody wants to go. Okay, who's going to go? 0 people. But if you get one person and they go, all of a sudden everybody wants to go. And so it's important to create the conditions that will encourage just one person to decide, okay, I'm going to start, I'm going to perform this. And it's sort of, it goes back to what Dina was saying about how, we've spent a lot of time over, the course of the spoken word experience talking about how everybody has their own story, everybody has their own truth. And now everybody's going to get up on stage, or in front of the class and share it. And it's our responsibility as colleagues and classmates and members of the same community to hold space for what everybody has to say. And so if that's the kind of environment that you foster, and it's easier in some classes than in others, and the teacher's input and the teacher's perspective on that is really, really crucial and really helpful, especially if the teacher shares a poem or if they go first, it becomes a lot easier for someone to want to perform and then for somebody else to go. And, I've been surprised, students go up and they perform 2 poems or 3, or they go up, several times, which is really something.
Thank you. Dina.
I have 2 things, kind of different. One is sort of an administrative thing, but along with what Leanna was saying, vulnerability is vital in this process. Like we're really going against our anti-emotional, push your feelings down culture that we live in. And so being really sensitive to that, but always putting the invitation out there. And I think Jason and I talked about this last year in particular, maybe even sort of over in a year and a half or a school year and a half, we noticed that the most vulnerable, the most emotional, the most wide open and spill your guts kind of poems were coming from boys. And we were surprised by that. But then thinking about it, I'm like, the fact that we're surprised by that says a lot about what's going on. And so really being able to manage the things that are happening in the room and sort of front loading the fact that this is emotional helps, and creating space and letting people know that, what we're doing is important and will serve you otherwise is really important. So I tell people sort of heading into the next thing that I'm going to say is that there's a trajectory here, right? So I think my administrative thing, the thing that I nitpick about the most is that spoken word and Islam are not synonymous. And there is an entire history related to just the culture and the history of slam within the larger context of spoken word. And so I think talking about that is important because as Reggie Kubiko has said multiple times in multiple places, slam is a gateway drug. And so you might start with a slam and then all of a sudden you're doing a solo show and you're doing theater and you're like Kai Cheng Tom, who was a Montreal slam poet who is now a children's book author and a therapist and is working on all kinds of other social engagement. It can become something very big. It doesn't have to, it can be a hobby if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. And there are many, many people who came before that you can go and investigate and follow the trails of. And you also, as Michael was saying, can plug into a national and even an international network of folks so that if you're going somewhere else, you can find the slam. You can find the spoken word community. You can connect with people and find like-minded folks all over the place. And I think that's something sort of, especially for older students who are trying to figure out what to do with this. Like, okay, well, I did it in high school and now it's over. No, it's happening in the Egypt and it's happening in university and it's happening in bars and it's happening all over the place. And it's happening in cities across the country and across the world. And so I show them, videos and I talk about the French scene and I let them know, like, wherever you want to be with this, it can meet you and you can meet your people there and really be sustained and connected by it. So I think for teachers to understand the difference between slam and spoken word is important, because it contextualizes everything that we're doing.
Thank you. Jennifer.
I love listening to the poets talk, and I'm very moved by everything you're saying. I think as English teachers, we face a potential pitfall in that we are giving an assignment, and so we have to balance the assignment with the organic experience of what they're doing, and I would say that is the biggest challenge. Also, balancing boundaries of what you're able to do in class and catharsis, and when a student reveals something that is sensitive, it becomes a responsibility of the teacher at that point to respond, to react to. So all of those things are huge. And as a department, we've talked about them. I think for the most part, we're comfortable with a lot of it, but sometimes we find ourselves in uncomfortable positions. So we make rules for the class that are different than the rules we have for competition in our auditorium that the whole school sees. So for instance, high school students always want to know, can we swear? And my rule is you can swear in the class. If I see your poem, we speak about it, and I feel like you're using it for the right reason, but you can't, in the auditorium, it's not our school rule. But of course you can do that possibly, at a competition you go to or a slam you go to that's out of school, but in school, this is how we have to do it. So it's just balancing all of those things. And sometimes it feels a little bit sad that, you're giving them school rules on something as precious as this. But the way that I feel better about it is that the fact that they're getting to do this at all is really, really important to a lot of them. And then they're exposed to the community that you're all describing, and then they can go off and they don't have to listen to school rules anymore.
Dina, go ahead.
I have an idea for the swearing and no swearing. It's something that I do in the classroom. I show them the Scoville pepper scale, and I ask everybody who likes spicy food, and I talk about sometimes things are too hot and you can't enjoy it. All you've got is the heat. And so, adjust for who you're cooking for. And so some things are bell pepper, your parent is in the room, and some things are habanero or like straight pepper spray, because that's in your journal and that's up to you. But you have to read the room and know who you're sharing with and adjust, because if something's too hot, they're not going to want more. But if it's just hot enough, they're going to want much more.
Wonderful. Jason.
I would say two things. One, be prepared for things to fall apart, because sometimes we get into really sensitive topics and difficult areas, and the kids might shut down halfway through. That's happened to me where the kid, I'm doing the piece with them and I'm trying to coach them through performance. And it happened to me last year for the first time. The kid just walked out of the room. It was just too much. And I'm trying to engage and dig and get to the heart of the piece and the issue, and it was just too much. So I had to follow up with the teacher. We worked it all out, but I think it taught me the lesson of this is a lot, and we've all been through a lot in the last 2-3 years, and the kids now are in a different space. So I'm asking questions like, okay, who wants to read? Who doesn't want to read, but they want me to see it? And like Liana was saying, there's maybe one kid who's like, okay, I want you to see it. And that's usually the writer. But then the other kids also want me to see it. So I think it's really about meeting them where they are, in terms of vulnerability, in terms of literacy. But also, this work cannot be done without, allies like Jennifer and Heather, who's a pleasure to work with, because she's engaging the students as I'm engaging them. And the difference between being in a classroom with a teacher who is on board as opposed to one that is not on board, it's like night and day. And we can go so much further when the teachers, are a part of it and write and share their thoughts and are vulnerable and allow themselves to be seen in a different way. Because I understand that when we're coming in to the schools, we're on your territory. You're giving of your time and your space and your students who are precious, and that's sacred. But I can't do this I can do it on my own, but it's not the same. when I'm doing it with a teacher who is there and wants to engage with difficult topics and knows the students and can kind of, give me a lay of the land of what's happening before and after, that makes a big difference.
So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Again, check out the show notes for lots of resources that can help you bring spoken word into the classroom, including where to get grants to pay the artists. Thanks again. Bye.